Welcome. This is Michael Beach, and you are dialed into the What Are You Doing podcast. This is the show for thought leaders who are investing in the next generation of leadership for their organization's future growth. This is also the show for emerging leaders who want to become that next generation of great leaders. Together, we can develop leaders who will, in turn, develop more leaders and make a huge difference in this economy and across the globe. All of us at Michael Beach Coaching and Consulting are excited to be able to bring you another podcast episode today. We're thrilled, frankly, that our work often leads to results that make a difference for those companies we work with, and maybe more importantly, for the families that make their living at those companies. We're especially excited today because we have the opportunity to introduce you to today's special guest, a great friend and a gifted business leader, Sonia St. the co-founder and CEO of Davenport Group, a company with an all-in commitment to their clients and to their clients' IT future, a company that provides real-world IT solutions and services to companies all over the United States. Sonia, it's a pleasure to have you here today, and I can't wait to hear what you've got in store for our listeners today. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Michael. I am excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Me too. I can't tell you how much. It's going to be a good one, I have a feeling. Well, Sonia, start us off. Would you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and about your fantastic company, Davenport Group, please?
I will be glad to. Well, I have had an unusual career. The first half of my career was in human resources. I started in HR right out of college and spent 30 plus years doing only human resources. And then the last almost 20 years, I have been running and managing Davenport Group. And Davenport Group is a solution provider. We specialize in commercial customers and governmental agencies nationwide. And we help our customers take care of all their data center needs, whatever that looks like. So we have about 55 plus employees, so just enough to keep it interesting. And during this period with Davenport Group, I've had a chance to really apply and learn from my employees what the leadership practices that I've learned during my career look like, and get a chance to really see what works and doesn't work.
Fabulous. What a great opportunity. Well, Sonia, I'm curious. I know that you are a very, very well-read person. Do you still read a book every week?
The last 6 months have been a little crazy, but yes, I would say I average at least a book a week. Now, not all of those are thought-provoking and heavy-duty, but some of them are, as my sister refers to it, brain candy. But yes, I do try to read at least a book a week, and it's my way of maintaining my sanity.
I find that amazing and more than a little bit intimidating. I thought I was pretty well read, but you put me to shame, Sonia. So one of my favorite questions to get us started with is to ask a guest about their favorite musical artist. What would you tell us about your favorite musical tastes?
Music is something I came to later in life, so it wasn't something that it was just there. I wasn't really musically attuned in my younger years, but
okay.
As I've gotten older and been exposed to different types of music and people's learning from them, there's one artist in particular that her music really resonates with me, and that's Eva Cassidy. It's sort of a tragic story. Was a very gifted young musician, and she did a lot of backup songs or backup singing for artists. And it wasn't until her death in her early 30s, after her death, her music just soared. Her family released a lot of her recordings that had never been released. And I don't know how many albums have been released since then, but I've got at least 10 or 12. And she has an amazing voice that's hauntingly beautiful that I love to listen to. Her music grounds me. I really, really appreciate all of her songs.
Yeah, she's really terrific. You mentioned once that Songbird is one of your favorite songs of hers, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big Fleetwood Mac fan. And so I listened to Eva Cassidy's version of Songbird and just absolutely fell in love with it. So I have that to thank you for. It got me listening to her pretty closely. And I think the thing I love the most about that song is her voice. But the second favorite thing about that version of the song is that she's kind of put a Latin backbeat and some guitar music into the song, which really makes it sound very exotic. Very cool.
It's great music.
Absolutely. Sonia, what's the best business or leadership book you've read out of all those amazing books you've read over the years?
This is a tough question, but I think when you boil it all down, I'm a huge fan of Peter Drucker, and I was fortunate enough to attend some of his seminars in the 90s when he was quite old, and I still got to participate and listen to him speak in person. And over the years, while I've read numerous leadership books, most of them all are different spins on an existing principle.
Sure.
And yet, when you read Drucker, all of that was new thought, and those were his ideas. And, you know, some of it's still dated. I mean, you know, these books were written in the 60s, but the fact that these are his original ideas and that he is the one presenting them and talking to you in terms of the effect and how to maintain it, I think that's pretty powerful. He was an amazing coach, consultant, leader, and thought leader. And I think his book, The Executive, is still one of the best out there. Again, it's dated in some concepts, but it's still a pretty powerful read.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's a terrific book. And, you know, I believe that Peter Drucker has been called the father of management science for a very good reason. He's amazing. Wonderful. Sonia, at what point in your life did you become interested in leadership, and how did you get involved in developing leaders?
I've had an interesting career, lots of different types of companies and different geographies of the country. So I've gotten to have some pretty rich experiences, but I think the main thing that got me interested in developing leaders, as I reflect back, is I was working at a company in Indianapolis early in my career, and I had a chance to work with a mentor that helped me to understand why one leader at this organization was much more successful with their team than other leaders at the same level in the organization. What he did was he dissected the leadership down to the component level. So communication, conflict resolution, trust, whatever the components were. And he compared and contrasted these individual leaders. That really started me on the path to not only observing, but also critiquing leaders. And then that led to me trying to study and learn how to become a better leader or to coach people to be better leaders.
That's amazing. Wonderful stuff. I think all of us have leadership mentors along the way that kind of take us under their wing. Was there anybody that made a big investment or a big impression on you, Sonia, as you were coming up?
I've been so fortunate to be mentored by some really talented individuals over the course of my career. Yet one person that really took me under his wing and mentored me was Gus Blanchard. And at the time, Gus was the CEO of Deluxe Corporation. This was the late 90s. And at that point, Deluxe, which has undergone some significant changes, but at that point, it was a $1.7 billion company. So he was quite busy running the company and being the CEO of this organization. I had been hired as a divisional VP for HR and had served in that role for a couple of years before I was promoted to a senior VP. And in the senior VP role, I was reporting directly to Gus. And I was one of his 4 direct reports. And yet the other 3 direct reports were all men that were old enough to be my father. So I was excited for the chance to spread my wings and be successful in this role. But after my first Monday morning executive meeting, I realized that I was in way over my head. And I mean, to the point where I was shell-shocked. I didn't even recognize some of the terms. And I was smart enough to maybe not disclose it. I was just taking notes like crazy. And so after
Okay.
that meeting, I said to Gus, way in over my head, I didn't even understand half the terms that y'all were talking about. We talked about it, discussed it, and what he graciously offered was to spend an hour, every hour after those Monday executive meetings with me, reviewing anything that I didn't understand and just sort of schooling me. For example, Hart-Scott-Rodino, like that was something that was a big topic of conversation that first Monday, and that's all about antitrust issues and mergers and acquisitions and why was it important. He took the time to explain it all to me, help me understand why it was relevant. And at the time, I was incredibly grateful that he would take the time to teach me and put it in context and show me why it was important. But in looking back, wow, I mean, the CEO of a Fortune 50 company that gave me an hour of tutoring each week for up to 2 years. He did this for like 2 years. And not only did it help me to understand the business that I was in and why these topics mattered, but it also, just the extra time and attention helped me to be not only successful, but really restored my confidence that I was worthy of being in that role. And I am 100% confident that that investment of his time has been a significant turning point for me in helping me to grow and be successful and be the leader that I am today. Because he invested in me, I've never forgotten that kindness. That was just, it's still mind-boggling.
What a great story. Gus sounds like a heck of a guy. And
Mm-hmm.
wherever you are, Gus, I can tell you this. Sonia learned an awful lot from you, and she's a really gifted leader. She's doing great things. Sonia, when you're recruiting leaders, you're welcome. When you're recruiting leaders to your organization, Davenport Group, what are some of the characteristics and traits that you're looking for?
Well, obviously, I try to hire leaders that have the functional competence, so whatever function they're trying to lead, that they are qualified to understand that. But the thing that I really try to focus on is finding what I call heart-centered leaders. And a heart-centered leader it's difficult to quantify, but those individuals tend to see people as an individual rather than just by a job title, as an accountant or a network engineer.
Okay.
I believe the strongest leaders understand that the whole person has to be managed and not just the time that they're at work. And by that, I mean, if you are having trouble at work or are stressed about work, it affects your home life. Yet, if you are having trouble at home, it's going to affect your work. So it's,
Sure.
You can't, it's all one person. You can only compartmentalize so far. And I think that if you take the time to manage the whole person and get to know them and understand them as an individual, that evokes tremendous loyalty and dedication. So I think that's really important that people focus on the whole person, and that's how I look at heart-centered leaders. And I try to recruit that type of mentality when I'm evaluating who I might hire.
Makes perfect sense. You've obviously invested a lot of time and energy in yourself over the years to become a terrific leader. Can you identify the best single leadership development investment you ever made in yourself?
The best investment I ever made in my personal development was just learning to trust my instincts. Now, I know that sounds easy, but it was not. Mm-hmm. It took me years to understand what my true gifts are and to listen to my intuition on certain topics or issues rather than be swayed by someone else's, convincing presentation or argument or their experience. I think this goes back to having a solid understanding of what you do well and what you don't do well and who you really are. For example, early in my career, I assumed everybody could do the things that I could do. And it was, took me, 10 or plus years to figure out, oh, wow, this is much easier for me than it is for other individuals, certain traits or attributes. So I think as I got more experience and exposure, just understanding the things that I was good at and listening to my own intuition, and that was really powerful. And it's it's been very helpful over the years to be able to rely on myself in certain areas.
I would imagine that is really splendid advice on a couple of levels. I love the idea about learning to trust your instincts and really starting to understand yourself seems to make terrific sense. Well, let's take a real short break so that we can give our sponsor a chance to give us a message. We'll be back in 30 seconds with Sonia St. from the Davenport Group. What are you doing to develop the next generation of leaders for your company? If I told you that in 12 to 24 months, we could prepare your next generation of leaders for greatness, would you be intrigued? A majority of today's businesses promote from within to develop new managers and leaders to fuel their future growth. Here at Michael Beach Coaching and Consulting, we've built our Emerging Leaders Development Program so that it guarantees your success. Our coaching philosophy is to outfit each emerging leader so that they can proactively and confidently solve business problems and anticipate the future on their own. Call us today at 520-732-2266 to arrange for a no-cost, no-obligation discovery conversation with one of our master coaches. All right, we're back. We are here with Sonia St. the CEO of Davenport Group, and we are having lots of fun talking about leadership and leadership development today. Sonia, we talked earlier about some of the things that you're doing to invest in yourself over the years. Got to believe that's got to be an ongoing project for a person. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you're doing to raise the level of your leadership game right now, these days?
I don't know that it's changed. I think it's been pretty much standard over the years, but I have to remind myself periodically, the busier I get, to just stop and take a moment. Mm-hmm. But I think that the main thing is just to evaluate where you are. So what am I doing? What's going on? How can I learn from this? Ask for feedback. And I do love to read. I read all the time. I'm a continuous learner. That's just who I am. But in addition to that, I like to read, listen, and then apply. And with that, I will say to my team, usually one-on-one, because that's when people tend to give you the most genuine feedback.
Sure.
Is, what can we do differently? What worked? What didn't work? How can we do it better next time? And to learn from that so that we're continuing to evolve and get better. Another thing that I do, I don't know that everyone does. I had a mentor coach me on this in the early 90s, but look for the learning in everything. Even if it's something terrible that happens, or you think it's terrible, or something wonderful, what's the learning? What should you choose to do again, or what should you try to avoid next time? What came out of this experience that you can take? What's the nugget and to make you a better leader? I think it sounds like a lot as I describe it, but I sort of synthesize that into the way I look at things, at least on a weekly basis. I try to do this daily, but certainly do it weekly as a formal process to say, okay, what went well this week? Where do I need to refocus my time next week? That type of thing.
Sounds like a great formula to me, and there's an awful lot of common sense woven into your approach. As I've observed over the years, having gotten the chance to work with you pretty regularly, you've been involved in developing leaders since shortly after you opened the doors to your company. Have you come to some conclusions over the years about 2 or 3 changes that you'd recommend aspiring leaders could make to improve their leadership skills? Got any advice for the emerging leaders in the audience?
I do. As hard as this sounds, I think the most important thing is to be authentic in all ways. And that's usually pretty hard for an emerging leader because they want to appear that they have all the answers. But if you can express vulnerability or disclose that you don't have the answer, that's the most powerful position you can be in. So never try to be something that you're not. try to understand who you are, know yourself. Again, back to what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. And then once you understand how you operate and work, again, what you do well and where you need additional development, build that into your approach. I mean, you can hire people that complement you, and I think that makes for a stronger working relationship. So first thing would be to be authentic and to be confident expressing your vulnerability or humanality. Mm-hmm. And then second, I think it's also important for leaders to remember that you need others to accomplish the mission, that you cannot achieve your goal without your team. And if your team knows how to work together and is willing to follow you, then pretty much anything is possible. That sounds like, it should be on a poster, but I really do believe that. If you get the right people together and you motivate them and you taught them how to work as a team, great things can happen.
Very, very true. Couldn't agree with you more. I've noticed sometimes that emerging leaders can get in their own way. They can get slowed down by something or get stuck behind something. Have you noticed anything over the years that becomes an obstacle or barrier for the people you're developing?
It goes back to the prior answer. When you think as an emerging leader that you need to have all the answers, or it'll be faster if I do it myself, then you need to stop and check yourself. Being able to admit that you don't have the answer is powerful and allows you to ask questions and learn from your team, which builds teamwork. And even though it's more time intensive on the front end, just slow down and teach your team how to do something that maybe would be faster for you to do yourself. That's a short-term process versus looking at the long-term. So the long-term goal would be to have that individual be as confident and skilled at doing whatever the task is as you might be. So those areas of thinking I can do it faster by myself or I have to know all the answers. I think that's where most emerging leaders get stuck.
Great advice. I am a card-carrying member of the class of people who spent probably 10 years of my life thinking I had to have all the answers. And man, I can't tell you how much time I wasted trying to pretend that I knew what I was doing. And once I finally admitted that I didn't know everything and that I thought I needed to, it just got so much easier to go get whatever it was that I needed. I wish I'd have learned that 10 years earlier. What's the greatest leadership advice anyone's ever given you, Sonia?
Oh, that's easy. And I quote it frequently. And I can tell you where I was when I heard it. And I remember the room, but I cannot for the life of me remember the gentleman's name that said it. I can visualize it, but I can't remember his name.
Fair enough.
But what he said was we were discussing how to motivate and treat employees, whether they, wherever you were in the organization. And what he said was, you can hire their hands and backs, but you have to earn their hearts and minds. And it sounds like a pretty simple phrase, but it's really very powerful because, yes, I can hire you to do a task, but if I want you to put your heart into it or to really think it through, is there a better way to do this, then I have to earn that. And that's not something that you can quantify by giving someone a raise. It's a heart issue. Do I have their heart? Do I have their mind? That phrase has really shaped my leadership philosophy over the years, and it all sort of is intertwined. It goes back to, what I was saying earlier in terms of you have to manage the whole person rather than just what they're doing at work. And I think all of this is interconnected. But you can hire their hands and backs, but you have to earn their hearts and minds.
Very, very powerful statement. I can see why it's stuck with you over the years. That would have an impact on just about anybody, I would think. Let's talk again about Davenport Group for a second. How important are core values in that organization?
Our core values are very important. And what I talk to my team about is that there's two things that you're measured on, what you do and how you do it. If you are great at what you do, and you accomplish the stated goals, but you leave a trail of bodies in your wake, that's not good. Yes, you achieved the mission, but, you left the rest of your team behind. Yet the other extreme is to have everyone in the organization love you and you win the popularity contest, but you never complete your work. Also not good. The goal is to balance those two, to balance your efforts and accomplish the goals with your team, but yet make sure that everybody's coming along with you. And, the how is really loosely correlated, this is my opinion, loosely correlated what we now describe as emotional intelligence. Yet, that term really didn't come about until sometime in the 90s, but it's a simple way of describing what you're focusing on. It's how you're doing it and along with what you're doing.
Marvelous. In the last 8 or 9 years, what I've noticed is there's 2 questions that companies forget to ask most often. The first one that they forget to ask, or they forget to address entirely, is why? Why are we doing what we're doing? And if companies just focused on that more often and talked about it more quickly in any process they were trying to master, things would go so much better. The other one that gets overlooked so often is how. You can give a sales team a bunch of goals, and if they go hit them, but you find out later that, like Wells Fargo did, they hit them by breaking the laws, that's not so good. So very important for companies to remember how important it is to ask the question why and the question how as they manage their teams. Thanks for sharing that nugget with our listeners, Sonia. We appreciate it. So I would be interested in hearing what you're thinking about that would be interesting to our listeners about investing in others to help them become great leaders. Any thoughts on that, Sonia?
Well, I've never known a great leader that did not believe in helping others or sharing their experience. I mean, if you think about all the leaders that come to your mind that you think, oh, wow, I learned so much, or they were a great leader and I would have walked through fire for them, whoever those people are in your life, they probably were helping by investing in, either your growth or others. So I think that by investing your time in others to nurture their growth, you're also reinforcing the skills that make you a better leader. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. If you take the time to mentor others, you also benefit from that relationship. And again, it's about slowing down to remember what's important. And, I can take this 10 minutes to explain how you could have done this better or how you could have done this differently. Or I can talk with you about whatever that issue is and set up another phone call to address that separately. I think if you build it into your day-to-day interactions with others, it makes it less scary or less overwhelming, and it makes it more of a commonplace practice rather than, okay, today, Tuesday at 10 o'clock is time for me to go be mentored. It really should be an ongoing part of your interactions with your team on a regular basis.
Very true. I'd like to hear a little bit about your thoughts, Sonia, about teamwork and collaboration in the workplace. Over the years, you've developed some high-performing teams. Do you have any observations about how to develop strong teamwork and collaboration on your team?
I do. I didn't mention it earlier, but during my run in HR, during the first half of my career, there was a 2-year period in there where all I did is I worked with leadership teams of Fortune 50 companies in working and developing their teamwork or enhancing their teamwork. And let me tell you, that was a learning experience. I walked away at some of those companies, all big names that, if I mentioned, you would immediately recognize. And I was shocked that the company was still able to function with the level of, conflict or dysfunction that they were demonstrating within the team. I feel like over the years, I've had an opportunity to apply and really see in real life how a lot of teamwork concepts work. And I think it boils down to this. I believe authentic teamwork is built upon commitment, trust, collaboration, and competence. And all of those qualities can really only be developed with considerable effort over time. Now, trust tends to be one that people of a certain age don't trust very easily. I will put it that way. And I don't know if it's because you've evolved to a point in your career where you're distrustful, but trust is tricky to obtain, but key for success. So while the tone is set at the top of the organization about promoting and valuing teamwork, the work really has to be done at all levels. So it's not just the leadership. It has to start at the top. But this means that focusing on teamwork begins at the hiring process. Describe that is a core value to your organization. And then you've got to foster the environment where you can develop those skills to improve relationships and maximize performance. Because I've never been part of a team that accidentally happened. I've always been part of really successful, high-performing work teams that were manifested from intentional action. Somebody was coaching us on how to put the work in and where we needed to develop further in order to be super successful. But if you've ever been a member of a high-performing team, you know what it feels like. It's a very different feeling. Mm-hmm. And again, those don't just happen by chance.
I would agree. I'd like to add one thing. I've had the opportunity to have a front row seat and watch you lead your company over, I guess it seems probably like it's in the neighborhood of 15 years now. But one more thing that I think has been key to your success has been warmth. You certainly get your team focused on commitment, trust, collaboration, and competence, but you bring to the equation a tremendous amount of warmth. I've been fascinated by how easily you show how much you love your customers and how much you care about your teammates at Davenport Group. I really think that's a very, very important component of your success, the warmth that you bring to that teamwork. Well done.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm happy you recognize that.
Yeah, I believe it taught me a lot as I watched you, and I've tried to pattern my company after yours to a large degree. You have a story that I think you could share with our audience. I was going to ask you about this. I think you wanted to tell us a little bit about a mistake that you made in your career and how it turned out. Can you share that?
Well, I will be glad to. Actually, there are many mistakes I could tell you about. This one just is
okay.
It's one that everybody can relate to. Again, back to I was working at Deluxe. I was the senior vice president of human resources. And if you think about anybody who's ever worked at a large company, benefits, which cover all employees, but your benefits rate comes from HR, and then everybody builds that into their budget. Well, so my team had to have our budget done early. And I made a huge mistake because I had allowed my team to submit my budget without my thorough review. Again, I trusted them, but because it was my responsibility, I should have checked it. And by week 6 of the new fiscal year, we realized something was wrong. And we spent several days trying to understand where the disconnect was before we discovered the error, which was that we had made a $3 million budget calculation error. And it not only infected my team, it affected the entire organization because everyone had used the numbers that we had sent to those individual business units. A big deal. And I lost face. I mean, it was a huge credibility blow, and it was like, oh, I can't believe I did this. So once I realized what had happened, I called my boss, Gus, and asked for a meeting. And once I was in the meeting, I explained to him what had happened and accepted full responsibility, told him it was completely my fault. And he patiently listened, which was his, style. Yet his face was turning mildly red as I explained what happened. So I knew that, he was also irritated. And then he took a deep breath, and what he said to me was, well, I know there's nothing that I can say that will make you feel any worse than you already do. Also, I trust that you're going to learn from the significance of this and never let it happen again. And that was the end of the meeting. And from that point forward, I try to remember that when somebody calls me to admit or own their mistake, I try to remember Gus's word and use that because he was right. There was nothing he could have done that would have made me feel any worse. I mean, I went into that meeting expecting to be fired or, public lashing, whatever. I just knew it was going to be bad, but I had seriously messed up. And it was a powerful learning experience for me that you don't have to berate someone. You don't have to yell at them. If they get it and they understand how they messed up, they're never going to do it again. And I think that was a pretty significant leadership lesson that I had never experienced, but yet because I experienced it, it's really impacted the way I interact with others when they goof up. Because everybody's going to make mistakes. Maybe not a $3 million mistake, but everybody's going to make mistakes.
Oh, wow. What a great story. I have to tell you, Sonia, I am convinced that I would love to meet Gus Blanchard. He sounds like my kind of guy.
He's one of a kind. He's a good egg.
Yeah. What an amazing amount of courage and confidence you have to tell an employee who's just made a $3 million mistake that, well, I know you're not going to feel good anytime soon, and I'm not going to do anything to make you feel worse. We'll just learn from this mistake and move forward. That's true courage in leadership. I'm impressed. Well, that's our episode for today, leaders. We want to thank today's guest, Sonia St. Charles, the CEO of Davenport Group, a real-world IT solutions and services company, for being our guest. Thank you, Sonia. Our interview today provided enough insights to keep our listeners busy implementing some of your best practices for weeks and weeks, I suspect. We appreciate your contribution to the program and to our listeners' ongoing success. Thank you, listeners, for joining us, and please reach out to us at info@michaelbeachcoach.com if you've got a great suggestion for a future episode guest, or if perhaps you'd like to become a featured guest yourself. We'd love to have you. We'll look forward to our next episode and seeing you all again. Until then, remember, start working to become the person you've always wanted to become by investing in yourself and investing in your team. Believe in yourself and believe the best about everybody you work with. Mostly take Sonia St. Charles' great example. Love your customers and work hard to help them achieve their dreams. Thanks again for being part of our show today, Sonia. We enjoyed having you here.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
We'll see you all next time. Take care.